Our student speaker today is one of those students whose journey to this graduation stage was not direct from high school. She's one of our adult learners, a graduate of our College for Professional and Adult Learning. Kathryn Thayer is a human services major. She also completed minors in psychology and management, along with human resources and art therapy certificates. She maintained nearly a 4.0 grade point average and was inducted into Alpha Chi and Alpha Sigma Lambda honorary societies, as well as the Grandview Honor Society, which recognizes her for being named to the President's List and Dean's List multiple semesters. When you hear more of Kathryn's story, you'll find out that she was living a busy life as a mother in her 50s, a grandmother, and a fully employed paralegal in Warren County. A serious accident disrupted her normalcy and pointed her back to the classroom. Here, she discovered that education not only teaches new skills, it has healing power. She can explain this better than I. So please join me in welcoming our 2014 student speaker, Kathryn Thayer. Kathryn.
I want to thank the Provost Cabinet, President Henning, the Board of Trustees, the faculty, the staff, and my fellow students for allowing me the privilege to speak today. I want to thank Dr. Paul Brook for carefully considering my words and encouraging me to peel back the protective covering and speak the raw truth. On a rainy April afternoon 4 years ago, a fully loaded semi rear-ended a string of 4 cars stopped at an intersection just a few miles east of here. I was inside one of those cars. I remember the release of a long sigh as my head came to rest against my hands on the steering wheel. I was fully conscious, but I felt disconnected from what was going on around me. There was a pressure in the front of my neck as if I were being choked, and pain radiated up the back of my head in cylinder-like patterns. When the first responder arrived, I declined medical care. I just needed to get to my own doctor, and I needed to stay close to the baby safely secured in this car seat behind me. As I stared at the accident scene in the rearview mirror, I viewed God's grace and His protection in the positioning of my car. I knew that if our tiny Honda Civic had been directly in front of the semi, the outcome of the impact would have been dramatically different. After that first sleepless night, I eventually arrived at my paralegal job at the Warren County Attorney's Office. It was that day that I realized the things I had done routinely for years I could not do. I had no recall of Iowa codes that had been well memorized. My fingers stumbled over the keyboard where they had smoothly typed the day before. I couldn't seem to focus my left eye, and my speech was greatly affected. My boss hired a wonderful temporary assistant to carry the bulk of my load as I relearned the elements of my job. It was as if that day before my mind had been traded for one 60 years older. So rather than to appear foolish, I became consciously quiet in the days that followed. The dedicated health team, my care team, grew in number as I was referred on to specialists and surgeons. There have been over 450 appointments. 2/3 of those appointments were for treatments and pain, physical therapy to control the pain and to recover the range of motion in my neck. But I have to be honest with you that none of that mattered. It was my mind that concerned me the most. My neurologist originally felt that when I had less pain and more sleep, my ability to remember would recover. 18 months after the accident, he told me I had a problem called persistent concussive syndrome. And a year later, that same neurologist quietly told me, "Kathryn, this is as good as it's going to get." And I blurted out at him, "I never thought I'd hear you say those words." And that night on my commute home from class, I told the God that I love, this is not okay. As part of my recovery plan, I had returned to college for the sole purpose of jump-starting my mind. I had felt that with the assistance of my cognitive therapist, my assignments could act as an extension of my cognitive therapy. Since I already had my associate's degree in paralegal studies, Grandview had been a natural choice with their paralegal bachelor's degree program. So I remember my very first class, constitutional law. I stared at the syllabus in disbelief. 8 legal briefs on U.S. Supreme Court cases would be due throughout the course of the semester. What was my advisor thinking? I felt Jackie Welty should have enrolled me in a less strenuous class like ceramics or basket weaving. I discovered that constitutional law was exactly what I needed. The class absolutely forced my mind to begin to cooperate. Every spare moment was spent studying, and at the end of the semester, I clicked into my grades and stared at an A. The tears ran down my cheeks in the writing center that day. My intellect was intact. I just needed to continue focusing on cognitive restructuring. In another class later on, Dr. Latham was discussing the effects of head trauma. I normally spoke very little about the accident, but for 50 points towards my overall grade, I would give a brief account of the events. My presentation began. I was a triple-tasking social director who loved a house full of, and I broke down in front of my classmates. Later, Dr. Latham, in a gentle voice, asked me what I felt was so good about being a triple-tasking social director. I watched her eyes, waiting for her to share her wisdom. She waited on me. I finally reached up, patted my back, and whispered constant affirmation. I knew then that I needed to consider very carefully the worth of the busyness of that life I was so desperately trying to get back to. I had begun studies in an attempt to return to my former self, but instead, the humanitarian spirit of Grandview University, the compassionate influence of my professors and classmates, and a curriculum that opened my eyes in a powerful way to generational poverty, addiction, and prejudice, and encouraged me to focus outward. My eyes had been opened in a real way to the needs of humanity, and my major was changed from paralegal studies to human services. And somewhere between an internship at an orphanage in South Africa and more recently sitting shoulder to shoulder at the homeless shelter assisting with art therapy downtown, my heart changed also. In a few weeks, a humanitarian puppy named Sky will come to our home. She will begin training to serve in the courtroom, bringing comfort to the young victims as they testify. She will go with me into rehab centers, children's hospitals, and organizations, any place where a four-legged friend can bring joy. My heart's goal now is to eventually work as a logistics manager for the Red Cross, organizing volunteers and supplies into areas experiencing natural disaster. 4 years ago on that rainy April afternoon, I set out on a 30-minute trip. I could never have imagined that half-hour journey would instead lead me here to you this moment. The life lessons learned have been many, perhaps too many to share with you today, but these things I know. Change is certain. There will be intentional and sometimes inevitable redirection throughout our life journeys. This redirection, as harsh as it may seem at the time, moves us to where we need to be. And this redirection moves us to who we need to become. Change is often the lens that allows us to catch sight of our higher purpose. And change illuminates relationships. True friends step up and hold on to us tightly through the strong winds of change. They are there and they will not let us fall. As we leave Grandview, our support system of friends will naturally change. We will again be given the tremendous opportunity of seeking out new relationships. Those carefully chosen relationships will inspire us and will encourage us to reach our highest calling. We are not leaving Grandview without a tremendous imprint of change on our lives. We have been well educated. We have been encouraged to see the needs of humanity and to give help. We are fully equipped to go out and make a meaningful difference in our world. My short-term memory abilities have not recovered as I had hoped. The concept of time remains mysteriously irrelevant to me. Tomorrow I will wake up and this day will seem as if it happened months ago. However, my mind is able to see the immediate moments of each new day so vividly, and it is beautiful. I've realized that I've been given a new lease on life. Absolutely anything is possible. And these things I know for certain. I know change is inevitable. I know change illuminates realness in relationships. I know change reveals God's blessings woven within adversity. I know that it is not in busyness we should live, it is in meaningfulness. And I know that we will take the humanitarian spirit of Grandview University within us and we will carry goodness into our world.